Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. In the Middle East, ceasefire concerns mount as Netanyahu demands hostage release, threatening to end the ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, Trump meets with the Jordanian King at the White House to discuss his plan for the US control of Gaza. For the first time, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy proposes land swaps in potential peace negotiations. This comes as Russia releases a US prisoner while one is killed in a ballistic missile attack on Kyiv. Elon Musk makes his Oval Office debut, addressing criticism over his influence in government. He defends his decision on major federal cuts, claiming the US will go bankrupt without them. After a two-day lull, fighting resumes in the DRC conflict with 51 killed in the northeast. Clashes continue despite ceasefire calls from 24 regional leaders. The delicate truce between Israel and Hamas is in danger as both sides accuse each other of violations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already declared that the truce will cease to exist if hostages are not exchanged by this Sunday. Here is the full report.
It is only 3 weeks into a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and both are already raking up allegations against each other, putting the truce in a dangerous position. This week's exchange of detainees has been disrupted as Hamas accuses Israel of violating the truce terms. Israel has hit back with a warning.
ההחלטה שהעברתי בקבינט פה אחד היא זאת. אם חמאס לא יחזיר את חטופינו עד שבת בצהריים, הפסקת האש תיפסק וצה"ל יחזור ללחימה עצימה עד להכרעה סופית של החמאס.
US President Donald Trump, whose envoy helped mediate the agreement along with officials from Egypt and Qatar, expressed his discouraging thoughts.
You have the hostages possibly there. They don't know where they are. And, you know, I have a Saturday deadline, and I don't think they're going to make the deadline personally. I think they want to play tough guy, but we'll see how tough they are. But it's going to be a wonderful thing.
On Tuesday, Gaza's health ministry reported that 92 people had been killed in Israeli military operations since the ceasefire began. Hamas delaying the next hostage release comes with allegations of Israel breaching the ceasefire by opening fire on Palestinians in different areas of Gaza, obstructing displaced residents from returning to the heavily bombarded north, and preventing agreed humanitarian aid from entering the enclave. The group also claimed Israel was restricting the entry of essential medicines, hospital supplies, tents, prefabricated houses, fuel and equipment for clearing rubble. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's look at the updates coming in from across Europe. Chelsea striker Sam Kerr was found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. It was after calling a British police officer stupid and white at the police station. Kerr became abusive and insulting towards police officer Stephen Lovell. A jury at Kingston Crown Court in London cleared the Australian captain concerning the incident in southwest London, which happened on January the 30th, 2023. An intercity train collided with a lorry at a crossing in Germany, leaving 1 person dead and 25 injured. Emergency services and the Dutch Bahn train company said the accident happened at a road crossing in Hamburg's southern Brauenberg area on the route towards Bremen. He added that 1 person was fatally injured and that others were hurt. A Swedish court sentenced a 52-year-old woman to 12 years in prison on genocide charges. It was in regard to the country's first court case over crimes by Islamic State group against the Yazidi minority. Accused of keeping Yazidi women and children as slaves at her home in Syria in 2015, Lina Ishak was convicted of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. Italian police have launched a series of raids targeting mafia clans operating and around the Sicilian capital, Palermo. More than 1,200 officers were involved in the operation. Military Carabinieri force said it was aimed at dismantling the area's mafia. The raids, which are the biggest for several years, were seen as a bid by Italian authorities to stop the mafia from rebuilding its governing body, known as a cupola. The Baltic states connected to electricity supplied via Finland, Sweden and Poland after disconnecting from Russia, which had supplied them with electricity for decades. Following the weekend's cut from the Russian power grid, electricity prices in the Baltic region have started to rise rapidly. This is due to low wind, no sun, the increase in gas prices and recently damaged infrastructure. Female genital mutilation has affected over 600,000 girls and women in Europe, primarily from Africa and Asia. Globally, the number has risen to 230 million. FGM involves the non-medical, partial or total removal of the external female genitalia. A recent European Parliament conference explored ways to prevent this form of sexual violence, with advocates like Valerie Lemorosi emphasizing its widespread presence even in Europe. Elon Musk made a surprise appearance at the White House, denying claims of a hostile takeover of the US government. Standing beside President Trump, he defended his cost-cutting measures as Trump signed an order giving Musk's agency more power to slash federal spending. Let's have a look at the report.
Joined by Elon Musk in the Oval Office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order Tuesday that seeks to significantly reduce the size of the government by instructing heads of federal departments and agencies to undertake plans for large-scale reductions in force. Trump's newest order directs the federal government to implement a workforce optimization initiative created by Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, which has been moving rapidly from one department to another to slash spending and gut programs. Musk, wearing a black MAGA hat and joined by his son X, stood next to Trump, who was seated behind the Resolute desk.
What I really want to say is, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
Musk called the federal bureaucracy an unelected fourth, unconstitutional branch of government that must be held accountable.
Well, we have this unelected fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative. And this is not something that people want.
Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates coming in from across the Indo-Pacific. In China, concerns over the effectiveness of generic drugs in public hospitals have sparked public anger and criticism. The public is questioning the drug procedure system, which favors cheaper generics over brand-name drugs. Doctors and patients are reporting ineffective treatments, fueling distrust. Despite government reassurance, the issue persists amid challenges in China's healthcare system. A truck cabin that had been sucked up by a sinkhole has been discovered in a nearby sewer line in Yashio City in Japan, possibly containing a human body. The 40-meter diameter sinkhole was created by a sewer break. While rescuers saved the truck's loading platform, the cabin remains inaccessible due to water flow and high levels of sewer gas. Bangladesh's BNP political party has publicly criticised the interim government amid unrest and security crackdown. With over 1,500 arrests in Operation Devil Hunt, BNP's Mirza Fakhrul met interim leader Mohamed Yunus to raise concerns over violent protests, including attacks on buildings linked to Hasina's family. IDC predicts that by 2027, 50% of its buyers in the Asia Pacific will only work with vendors that meet responsible AI and ESG standards, as enterprises shift from AI experimentation to full-scale integration by 2028. 50% of organizations will partner with vendors providing services for carbon accounting and decarbonization. In an update, Ukraine has agreed to a territory swap with Russia for potential peace negotiations. These talks, as said by US President Donald Trump, have gained momentum. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is also yet to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance amid regular offences. Here is a report.
The negotiations in the Russia-Ukraine war have developed two folds. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Ukraine will offer to swap territory with Russia in any potential peace negotiations. Zelenskyy added that Europe alone will not be able to shoulder Kyiv's war effort. Security guarantees without America are not real security guarantees, he said. This comes as he is set to meet US Vice President J.D. Vance on Friday at the Munich Security Conference, a vocal critic of US military support to Ukraine. Meanwhile, an American schoolteacher, Mark Fogel, freed by Russia after 3.5 years in prison, got a flag waving welcome from US President Donald Trump after a flight home from Moscow.
I want you to know that I am not a hero in this at all. And President Trump is a hero.
Fogel had been detained in Russia since August 2021 and was serving a 14-year sentence. Trump utilized the opportunity to mark the beginning of the end of the war.
It could be a big, important part of getting the war over with Ukraine, and we appreciate President Putin's what he did. He was. We'll tell you a little bit more about it tomorrow, but I think we've made great progress on the war also. Getting the war. I want to get the war ended.
In updates from the warfield, hundreds of Russian soldiers wounded in the war are being treated in North Korea, Moscow's ambassador to Pyongyang stated. Meanwhile, Russia's General Prosecutor's Office has released footage which allegedly shows two men from the Ukrainian military being led away in Moscow. According to a statement, they have been sentenced to 15 and 16 years in prison on terrorism charges after they were captured fighting in Russia's Kursk region. On the other hand, a Russian missile strike hit the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, killing at least one person and wounding 3. The attack caused damage and fires in at least 4 districts of the capital. President Zelenskyy responded to the attack by saying that Russian President Putin is not preparing for peace, amid the building hopes for negotiations. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some updates coming in from the world of business. Equities rise in Asia as traders take their stride. Federal Reserve Chairperson Jerome Powell comments saying US central bank had no need of a hurry to cut interest rates again. Although worried by Trump's tariff salvo, Asia reaps immense profits. Overwhelmed by tariffs and threats from the US, the European Union and Canada are to discuss a joint deal, the latest sign of a wider Brussels push to diversify trade away from the US is in order. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, "We will be working with our international partners and friends." Brazilian Finance Minister Fernando Haddad said Brazil has no intention to enter a trade war with the United States. This comment followed Trump's imposing of a 25% levy on steel. Brazil stands as the second largest exporter of steel to the US after Canada, providing 4 million tons of metal in 2024. The US stock market suffers a wobble while gold strikes new highs and traders wait in anticipation of Trump's next tariff move. European markets observed a rise with both Frankfurt and London again setting records. LBBW's Carl Healing said the market's ability to avoid major sell-off amid tariff uncertainty reflects underlying optimism. New York Federal Reserve CEO said numbers indicate that inflation will continue to move towards our 2% longer run goal. He later added it will take time before we can achieve that target on a sustained basis. Williams warned that despite strong fundamentals, the economic outlook remains highly uncertain. Days after parting with its flagship, Brian's creative director Gucci owner Kering reported a sharp drop in 2024 earnings. The French luxury group witnessed sales drop of 23% in its Italian brand Gucci to 7.65 billion euros. Kering chief executives François-Henri Pinault said, "Gucci will come back. I have absolutely no doubts about it." After 2 days of pause, the M23 rebels have assumed attacks on armed forces in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The rebels have seized vast swathes of land, including the major city of Goma. Here's a report on the recent events.
The Rwandan-backed M23 rebels have attacked Congolese government forces in the South Kivu province, breaking a 2-day lull in fighting. Heavy shelling began on Tuesday morning, 3 days after a summit of East and Southern African leaders called for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Tuesday's fighting erupted near Ihusi, a locality around 70 km from Bukavu and 40 km from South Kivu's airport. The rebels have seized vast swathes of land in the eastern Dr. Congo, including the major city of Goma. They are now pushing towards Bukavu, the capital of South Kivu, another key city in the region. Around 2,900 people have been killed since early January as a result of the hostilities, the latest UN figures suggest. Meanwhile, reports say that hundreds and thousands of refugees who have fled the ongoing fighting were being forced to return home by the M23. The M23 has denied this allegation, but French broadcaster RFI reported that several large camps for displaced people have been dismantled and their inhabitants made to trek back to their villages in conflict zones. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news stories from North America. Canada will strongly respond to Trump's new trade tariffs, says Prime Minister Trudeau. Trump plans a 25% tax on steel and aluminium imports from the 12th of March. Canada, the top supplier, calls the move unjustified and says it's the second trade dispute in weeks. The US imports millions of tons of Canadian metals yearly. Trudeau says Canada is the US's closest ally, while Industry Minister Champagne argues Canadian metals help North America stay competitive. Canada has appointed Kevin Brousseau as its new fentanyl czar to coordinate efforts against drug smuggling, fulfilling a promise to US President Donald Trump. Trump has threatened tariffs on Canadian imports unless stronger measures were taken. In response, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau negotiated a 1-month pause on punctuative actions in exchange for concessions, including this appointment. Public Safety Minister David McCounty said Brousseau will work closely with US counterparts to combat the fentanyl trade, while the White House claims Canada is a conduit for fentanyl. Data shows only 0.2% of US fentanyl seizures come from the northern border. Google Maps has renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America for US users, following an executive order by President Donald Trump. The change was made after the US government's Geographic Names Information System updated the Gulf's name in line with Trump's directive to restore names that honor American greatness. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum criticized the move, arguing that the US has no legal right to rename the Gulf, as international law limits sovereign territory to 12 nautical miles from the coast. Despite the controversially, the change remains in effect for US users while Mexico continues to recognize the original name. Western Union has suspended money transfers to Cuba after the US reinstated sanctions on Cuban military-run businesses. The move, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, reverses Biden-era policies and affects families relying on remittances. The sanctions target Finicimex, the Havana-based financial company that processes transfers. Western Union stated it would comply with the updated restrictions. While many Cuban Americans depend on remittances, some argue the Cuban government profits from too much money sent by exiles. And that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.
you